Pretty nice spots. Well, your academic journey is taking you to some pretty nice places. I'd love to hear, if I can, Professor, how did your journey from academia, it seems like a classic, great schools, great education, philosophy, you're a professor. What caused this shift to all of a sudden go to being a consultant and advisor to Fortune 500 companies on this new and interesting subject area?
Yeah, bad judgment. That's the short answer. No, it was a variety of factors. It wasn't sort of one thing. When I was a grad student, this is sort of a roundabout way of explaining it, but it turns out to be relevant, I promise. When I was a graduate student, I started a fireworks wholesaling company in Connecticut. And the reason that's relevant is that company turned out to be more successful than I thought it would be. I thought it was just supposed to be some, extra cash in the summer. But I grew it more than I anticipated. And so by the time I was a professor, I was at Colgate University and they had an entrepreneurship organization and they said, hey, listen, we heard that you have this business. Would you want to advise startups that are that come out of the university? And I said, yeah, sure. That sounds really fun. So I was doing that and I saw all these students doing cool, new, interesting stuff. And I thought, I want to do something cool, new, and interesting, but I love philosophy, ethics in particular. I don't want to lose, that sort of connection. I don't want to not do that stuff. So what would that look like? I guess it would have to be an ethics consultancy. Well, what the heck is that? Is that a thing?
Well, you had to go to ChatGPT to ask it what the heck it was.
I mean, I would have to first get into a time machine and travel forward like 15 years. But yeah. So, I looked around. I did Google it, not ChatGPT, but I did Google it. And there wasn't any such thing that I could find. And so I thought, okay, I don't think there's a market for this. No one's doing it. I don't think it's a thing. And so I sort of kept my eyes open, but I kept doing the professor thing, research, publishing, teaching, blah, blah, blah. And then you fast forward a few years and a couple things sort of came to my attention all at once, which was there was hashtag Black Lives Matter. There was that movement going on. There was the Me Too movement going on. There was the Cambridge Analytica scandal at Facebook. And then there were all these reports that were being put out by, Deloitte and McKinsey that the new generation wants more meaningful work and they'll take more meaningful work over higher pay, all else equal. And so I thought, you know what? These companies, and this is also, hashtag activism, right? So this is hashtag boycott Starbucks, hashtag delete Uber, all that stuff. And I thought, these places down with social media, they better get their ethical houses in order, but they don't know how to get their ethical houses in order because they don't know ethics. I know ethics. Oh, I think I have a market. And so that's the sort of businessy thing. That's the business side of the story. And then the more, if you like, the personal side of the story was my wife's career was Manhattan based. So we were going back and forth between Colgate and Manhattan, which is about a 4.5 hour drive. We already had one child. We had another one on the way. The back and forth wasn't going to be sustainable anymore. My two closest friends got denied tenure at Colgate, or were going to get denied. And so they left. I didn't really feel an intellectual community at the university anymore. And I thought, we've gotten to the point where I sort of feel like I'm a teacher in the middle of nowhere. I don't have the intellectual community that I wanted when I went to go get a PhD in philosophy and become a professor. And I see this market for this thing that I've thought of for years. All signs point to go. And so, off I went.
It's not normal. When you look backwards, it makes sense. But, people who've achieved what you did academically in terms of that first career very, very rarely say, I'm going to change a course like that, even if they do the analysis that you did in terms of your wife's career, your family situation, your social community, your academic community. That's unusual, and I applaud you for it because that takes some nerve
and naivete. But yeah, it takes both of it.
There's a fine line.
Yeah, an overabundance of confidence, unjustified confidence. That that's helpful. Yeah, no, it is odd. But I also thought I'm not obviously. You could see it in retrospect, but at the time I knew I wasn't a typical academic. I started that business. I grew that business. I was, it was a small, 8-ish person business, the fireworks consultant, the fireworks wholesaling company. But I already had a kind of business savviness. Half my family's from Brooklyn. I always felt less, I find it's funny that I'm stumbling over my words given what I'm about to say, but I've always found it easier to talk to people than I think most academics do. I've always had lots of different interests that are outside of academia. I'm sort of generally a risk taker of sorts. So, yeah, it all sort of fit. It all came together.
So tell me how you spend your time today.
Let's see. I mean, if we're putting aside personal stuff and we're talking about business stuff.
Your career now. I know you have a podcast and you've written a book called Ethical Machines, and it's really interesting. I was just this morning on the drive to the office, I was listening to Tucker Carlson speaking with Sam Altman, and you'd be able to stay with this. I wasn't. But Tucker took him down a path of, well, if machines are smarter than us, and we turn to this AI, let's say ChatGPT, version 5 for information, therefore it's a religion. And where is your catechism, and how can we understand what your prejudices are so that we understand what's baked into your models?
Yeah, I think what I mean, I didn't watch. I saw that they spoke, and I saw that he pressed them on some things. If I had to guess, some of the things that people are worried about is that Sam Altman and his type are trying to create what they call artificial superintelligence. So these are AIs that are smarter than us, and that somehow these things are going to take over. Maybe they do replace us. Maybe there's even the more robust claim that they ought to replace us because they're superior. And so I think if I had to guess, that's what Tucker's probably talking about. Why do you think that we ought to create this artificial superintelligence? Why should we bow down to it? Why should we prioritize them over human life? Something along those lines. Because there's this concern that we're going to get replaced.
The part that caught my ear, knowing that you and I were going to have this opportunity to chat, was there is foundationally, the prejudice the model is going to have is a result of its inputs. And so it has to have a bias of some kind, whether it's intentional or not, just because it's going to be a function of its inputs. And why not share with us foundationally what you think the guideline, you and your team are deciding on what the guideposts are, so that we can understand if that's something that we agree with.
Yeah. So this is a push for transparency, and usually large corporations are not big on transparency. So they'll claim it's intellectual property, that sort of thing. That's their secret sauce, etc. But yeah, they're not particularly forthcoming with those kinds of things. They're going to get slammed probably no matter what they say is the thing. So that's probably one reason why they don't do it, which is not to say that they shouldn't. But yeah, they're not transparent about those kinds of things. And so yeah, we're left sort of in the dark before testing is done. What's the kind of thing that we're dealing with here? And to take your example about biases, what kinds of biases was it intentionally programmed or unintentionally programmed with? And when I say unintentionally, I'm talking about they just give it the internet, they give it all the books, and they train the stuff. But then there's also a lot of modifications that they make to the system. So you train the thing, and now you do then you could introduce potential guardrails.
And you assign values.
You could try it. There's different ways of doing it. I mean, broadly speaking, here's how it gets done. There's lots of different ways, but the easiest way to understand is you have people, if you like, grade the responses as good or bad. So it gives an output, and they say, yeah, that's good. That's a relevant response, useful, thumbs up. Or no, it's not. And it sort of learns what's a good response, what's a bad response based on what those people are saying are good and bad responses. So what kinds of people are you hiring? What kinds of biases do they have? What kinds of instructions are you giving those people? That's more places.
What was the prompt?
Yeah. Right. How are you prompting? And then there are things called master prompts. So there's what we say to the AI, but there's also first a kind of master prompt that's given that you don't have access to. And then you don't know what it says. So you don't know, it can go in one direction when you want it to go in the other. Or you didn't know that it's subtly going, if you like, rightward or leftward.
Having come from academia, I'm dying to ask you, how does education get impacted now, particularly higher education, but education of all kinds? And how can they adjust quickly to, prepare students properly for the world that's quickly crashing on our shores here, and to make them keep themselves relevant? I read over the weekend about a program, I think it was in Nigeria, where they're using AI and behavioral training methodologies to teach everything a student would learn in 1 year in 2 weeks.
That seems impossible. Okay, so let's see. Where should I begin? So the first thing to say is that I don't know. That's the first thing to say.
But say you were back at Colgate And what would you be saying to the administration about how we, Colgate, needs to adjust our curriculum to make sure we're doing the right thing for our students?
I'm not convinced that adjusting the curriculum is the right call. So there's a couple of things to say here, and this is why I say I don't know. We don't know what the AI landscape is going to look like, or the technology landscape is going to look like in 5 years. We don't know what it's going to look like in 2 years, right? So what things looked like when I started this business, there was no such thing, or not for the public anyway, there's no such thing as a ChatGPT or a generative AI. Then that popped up. Now they're not just talking about generative AI, they're talking about agentic AI.
As I understand the sequence, and it's not sequential, it's we have AI tools now. We're moving into agentic AI. General AI seems to be on the horizon. How does that impact robotics? And then how does this big cloud hanging over our heads on the horizon, not too far off, quantum computing, influence all of that change? Is change just going to get faster and faster?
Well, that's the thing, right? Exactly. So it looks like it's going faster and faster. We've seen lots of developments in AI. So, let me give you at some point, maybe not now, but if you want, I can sort of give you my articulation of what things look like at a sort of the view from 30,000 feet about the complexity of AI. But you're absolutely right that not only is AI getting phenomenally complex, but we also have these other technologies. Most notably, I think quantum is, if we get to what's called a noise-resistant quantum computer. So the kind of quantum computer that can decrypt 99% of de-encrypt 99% of the internet. That's complicated. That's a really big deal. AI plus quantum, very complicated. AI plus quantum plus blockchain, complicated. Plus mixed reality, plus. So, okay. If you're talking about how should we train our, 18-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 10-year-olds, we don't know what kind of world, what tech is going to look like for our 10-year-olds when they get out of college or when they get out of high school. We just don't know. So I think that's part of the input. The fact that we don't know doesn't mean so therefore do nothing. The fact that we don't know is just to feel like a data point that we have to acknowledge. How do we act in the face of uncertainty? I think that a lot of people say, we know it's going to look like this. So how do we prepare for that future? And that seems to me an irresponsible way of going about things because you're not taking uncertainty into the mix. There's just too many variables such that we cannot reliably predict what the world's going to look like in 5 years, what jobs are going to be available. Think about we could talk all day about AI and quantum and mixed reality and distributed ledgers like blockchain, but what's the relationship going to be like with China in 10 years or with India in 10 years or with Russia in 10 years? How is that going to affect the socioeconomic situation that America is in 5, 10 years? Nobody knows. There's so many variables. So let's not pretend that we have an idea. That's one thing to say. The second thing to say is there's certain things that in order for us, if you like, to sharpen the human mind, it still has to be old school. It's not to say that you can't incorporate in some way AI, but if you want to get people who can say, zoom out from the trees to see the forest, if you want people who are capable of thinking systematically, if you want people to be able to break down complicated concepts or break down complicated ideas or break down complicated systems to understand all the moving parts and how those parts interrelate. If you want people to be careful thinkers and analyzers, the only way you get the human mind to be able to do that sort of thing is practice, right? The same kind of education that we've been doing for literally over 2 millennia. So I don't think that goes away. And I also, frankly, even with this sort of talk of artificial superintelligence, I don't think that we are anywhere near a place where expertise doesn't matter. In fact, I think that the people who stand to benefit the most from AI, at least as I've seen it so far, are the actual experts, precisely because those experts are capable of vetting the outputs of the AI. Right? So when I'm talking to my favorite AI model about AI or ethics or AI ethics or corporate or organizational change or theories of psychological change or whatever it is, I'm in my sweet spot of expertise, or I can read the thing and be like, no, that's BS. I don't buy. There's something that's not right there. That smells off. If I'm talking to it about theoretical physics or art history or I don't know, lots of stuff that are outside my expertise, I just look at it and I think, this sounds plausible, but I actually don't know. I don't have the expertise to sniff out BS in this context. And so it's the experts who are better at crafting and responding and benefiting from it. The novices don't have the wherewithal to actually vet it. So one thing to say then is we should still be training for expertise. That I think expertise in whatever field is still relevant. Can you find some fields that might go by the wayside? Sure, but I don't think most are going to. The other thing to say, though, is that we actually do face, I think, an expertise pipeline problem. Because the junior people are more easily replaced. Because if I'm an expert, I don't need to tell my research assistants.
Okay, so that cuts off your pipeline then. Yeah.
Right. And so exactly. So you don't need the junior people as much. You don't hire the junior lawyers. You don't hire the junior research assistants. And then 10, 15 years later, when those people are supposed to ascend to expertise, well, they were never hired in the first place, so they don't exist. That looks to me to be a problem. And if it is a problem, I don't know the answer.
Professor, in the last 6 weeks, we've seen a change in tonality in articles, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, reporting about internship programs being cut down to the point you just made, entry-level jobs being decreased dramatically. And then we've seen that each of the Fortune 500, I think without exception, forecast that their workforces will decline over the next several years as a result of efficiencies. And when I think of AI, I think of it in two categories. The one I can understand is efficiencies. If we build a small language model, or we buy a small language model, a licensed one in the law department, we can do with less lawyers. I can understand that. We can do with less people in HR if we have the right engine that can answer employees' questions, which, like IBM has done and eliminated 70% of the headcount globally in HR. So efficiencies, I can understand. Capabilities, the new things the new tools we should be able to build. And in our world, in the relationship world, we're in a gift business, flowers, all different kinds of gifts in the 1-800-Flowers companies. We think about how do we build relationship management tools that we can give to our customers so they can be deliberate and intentional about developing their network of relationships and of all different kinds and all different levels. So that's a capabilities play. But when you think about other fields, I think about medicine, and as a focus group of one, I had a headache, and I don't forget headaches, and it was with me for a couple of weeks, and I'm doing some research, and then I realized I started taking a new supplement, and I did some research, and one of the side effects of that supplement is it can cause headaches. Stopped taking it, the headaches went away. I heard predictions in the last 2 weeks that within 2 years we'll all have access to diagnostic models that are very, very good. We now have a third of all physicians in the country using the same large language model diagnostics, and they're feeding in and getting out. So these models are going to get awfully good. That has ethical challenges in it, and it has wonderful opportunities in it too for better health outcomes.
Yeah, no, all that is absolutely right. I mean, well, I don't know if the 2-year prediction is accurate, but yeah, these things are amazing. I mean, so, I do AI ethics and I help companies avoid the risks and blah, blah, blah. And so I tend to focus on the bad stuff that can happen. But no, the opportunity is huge. It's amazing. So, one of the issues is going to be, let's take the diagnosing patient thing. One of many issues is going to be, is it sufficiently accurate? How does it compare to doctors? And what happens if it gets it wrong? Who's liable? So we're going to have questions around that for sure. One really interesting
Usually it's the person with capital.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The best target for a lawsuit. I tell the story frequently because it's so demonstrative of what's going on. Before ChatGPT 4.0 was released, so when ChatGPT first came out, it was 3.5. A little bit later, it was 4.0. A person who was leading research at Microsoft Healthcare and Life Sciences had access to GPT 4.0 6 months before everybody else did, and tested it on a variety of, medical tests, diagnostics, et cetera, et cetera. And to me, one of the most fascinating aspects of it was, aside from the fact that I got a lot right, was that in order to vet the outputs of this thing, they needed massive teams of doctors. Because when your doctor says, yeah, I think this is the issue, that's because they're an oncologist, they're an internist, they're a geneticist, they're the thing that they are. They are the specialist that they are. Whereas these large language models are drawn from medical journals by geneticists and endocrinologists and internists and pediatricians and oncologists. It's, if you like, acquiring the set of medical knowledge that humans have, roughly. So when you say, oh yeah, this is what's going on, and you ask a single doctor, can you vet this? Can you verify this? They can't. Because it's sort of like, I don't know. I just have my specialty. This thing is drawn from data that I don't know how to interpret myself because it's not my specialty. And so we get this really tough ethical problem. What are the conditions under which we release a model like that to the public to use for, let's say, diagnostic purposes or prescriptive purposes? And given that, we can't really vet the outputs systematically. Given that those companies, the large language model companies, don't have medical training. It's a morass. So huge opportunity, huge risk.
And inbound. And if a company wanted to reach you, how would they reach you?
They could email me, reid@virtualconsultants.com. They can find me at reidblackman.com. They could find me at virtualconsultants.com. They could find me on LinkedIn. I'm an easy person to find.
At Harry and David, we work with our hands as well as our hearts, so you can enjoy sharing it as much as we enjoy making it. And that's what life's really all about, sharing with those we're closest to, no matter how far we are apart. Harry and David, share more. So a Fortune 500 company based in Manhattan calls you in and says, we're having these issues. How are they approaching you to help them? Are they asking you to be part of their internal/external team that's looking at issues? How does an engagement come about for you? And then how do you actually provide service to them?
Okay, so the sort of standard way that it works is that we'll start off with a maturity assessment or a gap analysis or a risk assessment. Different companies want to call it different things. But first, we just got to get a sense of where do you stand now. Usually, if it's a Fortune 500 company, they've already done some stuff and they find that they've hit a wall. So it's not like they say, we've done absolutely nothing. Let's start building. I mean, that was the case 5 years ago. It's less the case now. So usually they say, we have a policy or we have a draft policy or we've done this, that, our engineering teams are doing this, that, and the other thing, but we don't have a lot of oversight into what they're doing. They might say that we started doing some training, but we don't know what else, other kind of training we should do. We
get our people, training, not models.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, sorry. Training of people, not models. We did training for generative AI, but now we need training for agentic AI. We don't really have a good enough grip on that to know what we should be looking out for, let alone how we should train for it. So usually what they're looking for is, can you see where we are right now, see where the biggest gaps are, and then can you help us close those gaps? We usually don't become, if you like, an internal member of the team or external consultants or a boutique consultancy, and we're telling them where we see the biggest gaps and what to do about those gaps. Lately, one thing that we've been focused a lot on is the training component, training people component. And that's because increasingly, as we move from narrow AI to generative AI to agentic AI, more and more responsibility is put on end users as opposed to the developers. And that's because the developers of those big models are so far upstream of the use case that they can't see where it's being used, how it's being used, who's using it, and therefore what the risks are. They can't test it in that particular context of deployment. So people exercising their professional judgment for what constitutes responsible use increases as we get more complex AI systems. So doing a lot more around what does training look like for those people.
Does your company, Virtue, do you do research? Do you do surveying within the organization? Do you bring outside surveys that you've done elsewhere to help them level set?
So we will do, yes, we'll absolutely do surveys. We'll do on-site interviews, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That sort of thing is standard. I'll say that we don't use outside third-party surveys, and there are no such thing as external objective benchmarks or something along those lines in this area. I think some people try to pretend that there are best practices, benchmarks, but it's too new. It just happened. Agentic AI, it's not like it's been around for years and there's all these tried and true methodologies. And now we're going to see.
It got here on Wednesday.
Exactly. And I think some of these consultancy sort of, because they feel they're supposed to say, these are the best practices and this is what the benchmark is. The truth is they don't have that. So what we do lately, we've sort of changed the way that our framework for this. And actually I'm writing another book on this called The Ethical Nightmare Challenge. So the ethical nightmare. Because
it sounds exactly like that.
Yeah. Well, so it's supposed to be a sort of an articulation both of the problem and a framework for the solution.
And how much are you interacting with their legal teams?
Legal is always involved. They're never leading the charge. Except for one case I can think of, there was a legal executive who was really a big decision maker.
Yeah.
Usually it's someone in the C-suite on the tech side of the house that's leading the charge.
I see.
And what we'll do is, because there aren't these external benchmarks, we'll say, look, let's think through what the ethical nightmares of your organization are that might result from the wide-scale deployment of AI. What are those nightmares? It's going to be different from healthcare to e-commerce to entertainment. And so let's think about what are the actual things that we're trying to avoid here? What are the really bad things? And now let's identify the resources that you need in order to avoid those nightmares. And then let's figure out what training your people need so they can use those resources effectively. So that's the framework that we use now.
Being a pragmatist, it would seem to me that if I were in the C-suite at one of those companies, and clearly never qualified to be there, but it would seem to me by hiring virtue, I'm also signaling internally and to the different stakeholders that I'm concerned about this issue. Yep. And I'm not just pondering it, I'm doing something deliberate by bringing these wonderful people in who have this different set of expectations and experiences that are helping us think through these difficult issues. I would think that's a good signal. I think it's a good practical and real thing to do. And I think it's a good item in your defense table.
Yes, you're not going to find me disagree with that statement. I will say this though, which is it's a difficulty that I think we've run into multiple times, which we're actively solving for. And I think we've gotten a lot better at it. It's that, as you know, you oversee a large organization. Large organizations are fractured. The left hand doesn't know what the 8,000 right hands are doing. Mm-hmm. So someone can bring us in, but the other 8,000 hands don't know. And it could be that they want to do the right thing, or at least rather, they don't want to do the wrong thing. They want to make sure the ethical nightmares aren't realized. They bring us in to help them.
Is it safe to assume that Cambridge Analytica did not hire you?
Correct. They did not. Do they still exist? I think that maybe they still do.
I know. I'm sure their name is different.
Yeah, right. They might exist under a different name. Fair enough. Yeah. One thing that we found is that we're really engaged in a cross-departmental enterprise effort here, right? It's not just for the data scientists. It's people in HR who are using AI. It's people in marketing, and getting this cross-functional, cross-departmental alignment, buy-in, momentum that really requires, as I know you know, a kind of ability to politically maneuver within a large organization. And I think historically, the people that we work with, even though they're in the C-suite, are not very good at that. They're good at looking down into the department that they head. They're not very good at looking across the organization and pulling people in. And so that's one of the challenges that we faced over the past several years that relatively recently we've figured out is a bit strong, but we've massively improved on that front to help our clients figure out how do I need to bring in marketing and risk and legal and HR, et cetera, et cetera.
Chatted with a fellow last week, terrific young man who wound up taking care of a very bright, well-educated, went to a nice school up in Cambridge. I won't tell you which of the two, but he wound up being a caregiver to his grandmother who was having cognitive diseases. And that year and a half that he spent with her, it gave him the idea to create a software tool, an AI software tool that calls people on a subscription to chat with him, and it learns. And you can so if someone a child hires this company for their parent, it might say to them, "I want you to call them every day, maybe twice a day. Here are the subjects they're interested in. They're Met fans. They're interested in this, that. They like politics. They're really interested in this. They're churchgoers. Here's what they're really." So it gets smarter. You can feed the model. And then it'll alert you to the parent's anxiety being up because of different keywords or tonality. I thought it was interesting. I thought it had some interesting applications, but it would be like a big sizzling steak on your fire in terms of all the ethical and moral concerns there. And then, of course, I read last year about a young lady that was building models that young men were dating. And she was making at that time $400,000 a month, and these young men were really developing deep emotional relationships with these AI tools. And then you have people like Scott Galloway at NYU who talk about the real tragedy of what's happening to young men in this country right now, and he expresses his concern so eloquently. So on the pop side of AI deployment and the ethics around those issues, what are your concerns about senior companion tools or young men, particularly young men, who are developing super dependencies on artificial relationships?
Okay, big question. So there's a lot to say here. One thing to say is I think Scott's right about those kinds of issues, that there's an epidemic of loneliness. I don't think anyone could reasonably deny that.
Which is ironic in an environment where we're so many, so close. And because for me personally, as an old guy, social media is a benefit to me in terms of my relationships. I'm able to maintain more relationships, keep them from getting stale. It's definitely a plus in terms of my relationship. But I'm not scrolling through Instagram wondering what someone else's outfit is.
Right, for sure. Neither am I. So then the question
By
is,
the way, nice shirt.
Oh, thank you. I got it on Instagram. So, yeah, one question is what are the root causes? And I say causes. I don't think there's one cause of all this loneliness. Obviously, social media, endless scrolling, blah, blah, blah. That's a big factor. There's got to be more to it than that, though. So one question is, what are the root sources, and to what extent can we tackle the root sources, and who's responsible, who's in the we that should be tackling those root causes? That's one thing to say. When it comes to things like companions, it's a tough issue, obviously. One is, I think everyone agrees there needs to be sufficient transparency with whether it's children or the elderly or anyone in between. This is an AI. This is not a person. Mm-hmm. So if the person calling,
even if it's named.
Right. It has a name, but listen, this is not an actual person. They don't actually feel anything. They are a tool for you to use and have conversations with, and I hope you find it engaging and useful, et cetera, but it's not an actual person. That, full transparency. There's then two different ways of thinking about this, broadly speaking. There's what I think is kind of the default way that a lot of ethicists think about this is that it's BS friendship. It's not real friendship. What it is, it's kind of a lie dressed up. People have talked about, there's a famous thought experiment called the pleasure machine. I think it was Robert Nozick, famous philosopher. Hey, listen, the version that I like, my version of his thought experiment is, let's say you just had a kid, right? So you have a newborn, someone knocks on your door. It's, some famous scientist, and he says, listen, I can take your kid, I can hook him up to this machine, and they're going to dream forever wonderful things about how their life unfolds and the friends they make and the loves that they have and blah, blah, blah. They'll be actually, in a quasi-vegetative state on their bed, but they'll have this amazing experience, as it were, in their head. Would you like that for your kid? And you think, no, that's a nightmare. They're not living a good life in that case. They're systematically deceived, and that's a bad life. I think that's the instinct of a lot of people. And then they take that thought experiment and they apply it to AI companions, and they say, yeah, it's like that. This is a lie. This is like the experience machine. It's not real friendship. And therefore it has no value at all. There's another way of thinking about it, though, that I've been thinking about for the past couple of months. And I haven't written anything on this yet, but it's in my back of my head that I should write this up one day and see what people think about it. Maybe you can tell me what you think about it. I think that we have lots of emotional relationships with fictional characters. You go to the movies, or you watch a film, you read a book, you're crying. You're laughing. You're grieving, even though they're actors, and here you are weeping in a movie theater or whatever it is, right?
It's really interesting.
Right? So we know it's fictional, but we have these
we surrender to it for the emotional benefit, participation.
At the very least, we're emotionally engaged in a way that I think people find meaningful. I mean, this is to put it grandly, it's the point of art. It's to, among the apart, is to engage us emotionally. And so we don't criticize people who cry in theaters and reading books or at plays or something. That's not real. Why are you crying? We say, that's a normal, good human being. And if you didn't cry at this, you'd be a psychopath. Okay. So the way that I've been thinking about AI companions lately is something like, maybe we should regard it as, it's just greater engagement.
A good book.
With fictional characters. Exactly. It's like a choose your own adventure book, but it's more interactive. And if it's interactive
it's assisted
fiction,
daydreaming.
It's assisted daydreaming. I like that. Yeah. So, why should we regard the emotions that we have with the fictional character with which we engage as either immoral or valueless or meaningless, but regard our emotional engagements with fictional characters in books and theater as constitutive of, human meaning making and the value of art. That seems like a disconnect.
From gratitude to comfort, new beginnings to birthdays, celebrate life's moments with something special. Find the perfect gift at Harry & David. We make it easy to be thoughtful. When sometimes I hear someone say something in an eloquent way like you just did, and it just changes how you think about things, and you just did for me. And I'm reminded when I used to be involved in baseball, and we were at a meeting, and people were talking about why would anyone watch someone play these video games? Why would you go to a Barclays Center to watch this big video game competition? And the assistant commissioner of baseball at the time said, "We do it every day. What do you think our business is? People are paying to come watch someone else play at a level we know we never could, but we find entertaining and all the social ramifications." And his comments like that just changed my mind about whether or not that was ridiculous, like you just did, about how we should think about these different kinds of engagement. I have grown kids and very good and fortunate to have grandkids. And I see my kids, who are all good parents, by the way, which is I'm particularly proud of, struggling with their kids in terms of device access. How much they're on device, particularly the youngest ones. I'm sure you're asked all the time by your friends and neighbors and relatives, what do I do about all this screen time?
But no, this is Jonathan Haidt's thing. We all sort of know this, right? If your kid is engaged in this thing 24/7, that's not good. I think I'm on board with Jonathan Haidt's general prescription, which is something like no screen, no social media until, 16, 18 or whatever. No need for smartphones. My wife and I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. They have no phone. We don't even allow texting. Some of their friends have things for texting. We're like, you don't need any of that. There's no need for any of that. So I think the general advice of as little as possible for as long as possible seems like exactly the right advice.
But if you're on an airplane or you're in a restaurant.
Oh, not a restaurant.
Surrender.
Yes, airplane. So I'm yes, airplane. No on the restaurant. Yes, the airplane, because that's just a mind-numbing activity. You just sit there and you just need to be occupied. Fine. But a restaurant
makes travel a lot easier with young children. Yes,
100%. Like glue the iPad to their foreheads, whatever you got to do. But I think restaurants are places where we make connections. We're
social
at a
interactivity.
Table. It's social interaction. We're not at the restaurant just so we can get sort of food shoved down our throats. We're there. It's a social event. We talk with each other about our day. Even if the kids are not really engaging that much, they still hear parents talk to each other. What did you do? How was your day? Blah, blah, blah. You talk about your friends or your plans. And that's all socialization. That's all helping to fight loneliness, right? Because, one of the things that we do is, and this is something pushed by my parents, is every night we have dinner together. Like it's not, yes, of course there's exceptions, work stuff, whatever, but 5% of the time, there's no phones allowed at the table by me or my wife. There's obviously no TV playing or anything like that. There's no screens, and it's just, you just have to talk. So I think parents are actually, this is me maybe being too judgmental or something like that, but no, get kids at a restaurant sucks. That's one thing to say. It's just
it depends on the age. If they're 3 years old, they're not going to be involved in the conversation.
Right, but they can still be there. You don't have to give them, and then you're also training them that this is what we do at restaurants. No, it's not. At restaurants, we talk with our family and friends. That's what we do. And so it's, you probably go out to restaurants less when they're 3 because they're a pain in the ass, but
exactly.
but still I'm pretty anti-screen at the restaurant.
What gets you excited about engagements that you're working on now?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, so I'm actually really excited about the Ethical Nightmare Challenge, this sort of new framing. And the reason is that I've been doing this for, 8 years, 5 years, really intensely focused on AI more than anything else. And I think that the way that large companies go about solving the problem doesn't work very well. Sometimes it does, but implementation is really hard because they're such large organizations. I know it's not just me because I've been hired by, as an external advisor, 3 of the 4 big 4. I know what they're doing. I know how they operate. I know other people in the space. I talk to them. And implementation of these AI ethics programs, or responsible AI programs, as they like to call them, is very difficult and it's very slow. And one of the big things is that the C-suite is a bottleneck. And it's a bottleneck because everyone is taking this kind of policy-centric approach. Let's have our enterprise-wide policy. It's going to take there's so many cooks in the kitchen. We're looking at easy 9 to 12 months before it gets board approval. And then you've got to roll it out. You got to roll it out in bits and pieces because you're a company that spans, dozens of markets or hundreds of markets, dozens of countries, several continents. And now you got to translate this policy into particular departments, to particular workflows. Meanwhile, it's been like a year and a half and the technology has changed again. And oh my God, we're implementing this policy that doesn't really work anymore because it doesn't speak to generative AI or agentic AI. Now we got to get the cooks back. So it's kind of turned out to be a bit of a mess, frankly. And what I'm excited about now is what we've started, the Ethical Nightmare Challenge, which doesn't require that we start with the C-suite and a policy. And it doesn't, the other thing is that they start with process and we start with outcome, the nightmare. Let's talk about what the nightmares are. And that can be done at the project level. It can be done at the department level. It could be done at the enterprise level if you want. But that framing of what are the ethical nightmares of your project for this particular project or solution or for your department? What resources do you have to avoid them? What kind of training do people need? That framing works everywhere. So we can take this risk-based approach. We don't have to start at the top. The C-suite doesn't have to be a bottleneck. And there's certain kinds of training that we can do that's sensitive to that framework that we can implement pretty immediately without having to wait for the board to approve a policy, which is going to take a year. So that's the engagements that are exciting me now because we're actually starting to implement this new design and implement using this new framework, and it's looking good.
Plus, when you have a good handle like that, ethical nightmares, people they get it. It's easy to get their attention because we can understand that.
Yeah. So I actually came up with the phrase, the Ethical Nightmare Challenge, for an the Harvard Business Review article that I wrote maybe 2 years ago. And then I was like, oh, I really like that. And I sort of forgot about it, know what to do with it. At the time I said, that sounds like a good title for a book. I just don't know what the book is about yet because I had just written Ethical Machines, and then you fast forward a couple of years and the risk landscape has changed so dramatically because we've got generative and now agentic and multi-agentic AI that, the challenge has gotten way bigger than it was before for a variety of reasons. And actually there's another book here. And so then that's why I started writing the book with that title, The Ethical Nightmare Challenge.
Makes all the sense in the world. I assume, am I correct in assuming that there's going to be lots of disruption and the disruption is going to increase in pace in the months and a few years ahead?
Sure looks it. So let me give you a sense of what's happening right now that I think is kind of bananas. It's kind of crazy. The change is not just the result of a new kind of AI, right? We had narrow AI. That's like recognize my dog in photos, spot the broken bone in the X-ray, read these resumes or the mortgage applications and green light the good ones and red light the bad ones. That's narrow. Then we have generative AI, like a chat GPT. The thing is that that narrow AI and generative AI, those are building blocks. They're not just different kinds of AI. They're building blocks for building really complex AI ecosystems. So now you can talk to your LLM, ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever it is. And now it's connected to the internet, right? You could connect it to your Google Drive. You can say, I want you to go find me such and such. And then it goes off to the internet, finds the thing and whatever. What technologists are working on doing is you could take your large language model, which is going to act as your agent now. You connect it to 30 databases, 20 narrow AIs, 5 other generative AIs, the internet, 20 other software tools. Maybe it's your CRM and blah, 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 all the other tools that you've got lying around in your organization. And now your LLM has access to all those things. And it's now not just the AI that you're interacting with. You're now interacting with an AI ecosystem. There's an ecosystem of software that your AI is acting on and with on your behalf at your request. That's a really complicated system, and that's your agent. That's just one agent, right? So that's really complicated.
Now your agent is going to talk to my agent. So I think agentically, from as a retailer, an e-commerce retailer, I think we have to be able to interact with your agent, and we have to have a wholesale agent that is signaling to your agent the right properties to get your agent to say, this is the right agent for me to do this function with.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to have internal, it looks like this is where we're headed. I mean, and it doesn't require the invention of a new kind of AI, it just requires stitching together what already exists. You have a bunch of internal agents, right? Let's say to 1-800-Flowers, you've got a bunch of internal agents. Let's say there's a marketing agent, there's a finance agent, whatever. And then they have to work together. So then you're going to have an orchestrating agent. So an agent who, if you like, oversees and manages all those other agents. And then, see, from a risk perspective, at least you, in principle, have insight into how all those agents were made, and you can spot where the risks might be, where things can break down and falter, et cetera, and you've got this agent overseeing it. But it's already phenomenally complicated, right? Now have your agent talk to an agent of a third party, or rather, an orchestrating agent of a third party, who's managing all these other agents, and you have no insight into how they built and tested their agents. So how do you identify all the risks there and manage all the risks there? That's a huge problem.
I would suspect that the best thing to do in that circumstance is to call this outfit Virtue.
That would be helpful. Yes, please do. Yeah, but it's a hard problem. I mean, yes, we can do something to solve it. At the same time, I'll tell any company, look, there's a complexity curve here of AI, and you need to plot where you are on that complexity curve and build the nightmare avoidance infrastructure and training that you need, given where you are in that complexity curve right now and where you plan to be in the next, say, 6 to 12 months or whatever it is. I don't think anyone is ready for multi-agentic AI where agents are talking to agents of other companies. We don't have the technology will tell you they don't really have the tech infrastructure to oversee those kinds of interactions.
Well, I surely wouldn't want to be a 7 or 10-year-old in your house trying to win an argument with you.
Yeah, it's not easy, but they're getting good at it. Like AI, they learn by example. So
their agents are learning from your agent.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you must be in real demand for your business, and I would imagine you're really in demand to be a speaker as well.
Yeah, I do a lot of speaking. Yeah, I have an agent who represents me. I'm doing a bunch of speaking. I'm actually going to Bilbao, Spain in about a week or two to give a talk there. Yeah, I do a lot of keynotes.
Was that a real twist of your arm to get you to go to Spain this time of the year?
It was so difficult.
Thank God they pay you double for overseas, huh?
Yes. Must I get paid to, a good chunk of money to go eat Basque cheesecake?
Family going with you?
I persuaded my wife said, I'm doing so much traveling, but I said, it's going to be your birthday. You come with me. So my wife is going to come with me. My parents will come in and they'll watch the kids. And yeah, we're going to go to Bilbao for a few days and I'll give a talk. And all we have to do is pay for my wife's airfare and everything else is paid for. And then I get a fee. So it all works out.
Terrific. Life is good. Well, it's such a treat to get to meet you and hear from you. And I have so many notes of things I have to worry about now more than I realized. But it's
just call your friends at Virtue.
And on that note, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, is it virtue.com or virtueconsultants.com?
It's virtueconsultants.com, or you can go to reidblackman.com. That's sort of my speaker website.
That's REID Blackman, BLACKMAN.com.
I'd say Blackman, but yeah.
Blackman. I'm sorry.
Blackman, BLACKMAN. Yeah.
Yep. Well,
right.
We have in Nassau County, we have a Blakeman who's our county executive.
He almost got a good name.
Almost. He's doing a good job, though. We're the safest county in America.
Oh, that's good. That's actually
4 years in a row, but who's counting?
That's pretty good.
Well, I'm so nice to meet you. Hope you have a great trip to Spain. I look forward to chatting again sometime. You've piqued so many different questions and issues for us and solved a few others for us. So thanks for being so generous with your time and your knowledge.